The moment a 7-year-old told me my biggest fear about heaven was dead wrong, something inside me cracked open. I'm still sitting on this park bench where we wrapped a scene for The Chosen, sunlight leaking through a canopy of giant trees like warm gold, and my hands won't stop trembling. For years, I've carried an unspoken dread that eternity might be a gray hallway with no doors, endless hymns, endless clouds, a long white sameness where desire goes quiet and curiosity dies. Today, a child drew me a doorway, and on the other side I heard laughter. Playing Jesus forces you to stare straight at questions most people only glance at. I've read the descriptions, traced footnotes in heavy commentaries, and whispered the same prayer on repeat before call times and after rap. God, show me what forever really is. Beneath all that study, there has always been this pebble in my shoe. What if paradise is polite but hollow? What if worship means drifting in circles, smiling because you're supposed to? I never said it out loud. I hardly let myself phrase it in my mind. But the ache stayed. This afternoon, while the crew packed cases and cables, a family walked over to say hello. The parents were kind, a little starstruck, and their daughter, Emma, hid behind her mother's leg the way shy children do, peeking around like a sparrow. When she finally stepped out, her eyes startled me, not because they were dramatic or unusual, but because of the steadiness. 7 years old, yet carrying this quiet, anchored knowing that felt older than all of us. Her mom told me Emma had been in the hospital for weeks, that one night, scared and alone, she said the room filled with light, that Jesus came, not like a trick of the dark, not like a dream you chase and lose, Jesus. In the room, I've heard plenty of stories, enough to learn caution. There's a difference between wishful thinking and revelation, between the haze of pain meds and the shock of true encounter. But the way Emma stood there, hands folded, gaze unwavering, made me set aside the inner skeptic and lean forward. Her dad explained she'd started drawing, pages of scenes she insisted were from heaven, and speaking about conversations that didn't sound like anything they'd taught her, concepts too layered for a second grader, and yet she described them as if recounting recess. Then Emma looked at me and said, as simply as naming the color of my shirt, "You don't look like Jesus at all." I laughed because what else can you do? But before the laugh could fade, she added, "Your heart feels like his. He told me you would understand." I've been on sets long enough to fake composure. This pierced it. The world around us narrowed. Tree shade, a patch of grass, one small voice peeling back my defenses. She told me about the hospital room, how the walls seemed to soften with light, not blinding but living, like the glow had a pulse and a patience. She said Jesus didn't open the door. He passed through it as if doors were only necessary for people who forget what freedom feels like. He was taller than she expected, kinder too. Not a painted gaze hovering above the world, but a smile that met her at eye level, brimming with the secret thrill of someone who can't wait to show you a surprise. Then he took my hand, she said, and we flew. Not with wings, not with the strain of effort, but as if motion itself had become soft water and they were carried by it. She called it liquid light. No fear, no lurch in the stomach, just the sense that this was the way humans were meant to move before we forgot how. She spoke with the easy certainty of someone describing a favorite ride, except the ride was eternity, and the ticket was a hand she could still feel in her palm. There was no searching for details, no sideways glance to her parents for rescue. Her words arrived like stones, set along a path, each one clear underfoot. She laughed, telling me how ordinary it felt. And the laughter loosened something in me I hadn't noticed was clenched. For a second I could see my own doubt from the outside, how small and tired it looked compared to the glow in this child's face. If you've ever wondered where you're watching from or what time it is there, I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments, then come back here with me, to this bench under these trees where I'm learning from a 7-year-old how to breathe in hope again. Because the truth is, I had been praying this morning about heaven, asking God to rescue it from the cliche I'd accidentally built in my head. And now this family, during their lunch break stroll, had delivered an unexpected answer. Emma, who once cared more about cartoons and monkey bars than mysteries of the soul, now talks about God the way other kids talk about neighborhood friends. Since the hospital stay, her parents said she will pause mid-afternoon to pray with a quiet intensity, or sit at the kitchen table sketching scenes she can't stop remembering. She doesn't posture or perform. She doesn't try to impress. She just tells the story as if the world will be kinder if we hear it. And somehow, while she speaks, the world is. I asked if she would tell me everything, every detail she could recall. Her face brightened like someone had lifted a shade. Jesus told me to, she said, with the unself-conscious joy of a child given a responsibility she trusts. He said to tell people what I saw, especially people who help others learn about him. I swallowed hard. You spend years portraying a man you love and fearing you'll misrepresent him, and then a little girl hands you reassurance like a wildflower. Before she described the places, she tried to give language to the feeling. Being near him was like standing in sunlight that hugs you back, like warmth that listens, like the air itself smiling. I wrote those phrases down later because I needed them. If theology is the map, presence is the wind that fills it like a sail. And sitting here, script pages crinkling in my pocket, I felt a draft catch. Everything on earth, Emma said, is the shadow copy. Heaven is the real. She didn't say it as a rebuke, more like someone offering a key. I realized how tightly I'd clutched a lesser picture, how nervous I'd been to find out forever was a waiting room with nicer chairs. She kept talking, and I kept losing track of time the way you do when a story begins to open a door you didn't know your heart had locked. I glanced across the lawn where our crew had eaten sandwiches in a ring of cases and cords, and I tried to imagine the unseen world pressing in on this ordinary park, the way color might deepen, the way sound might bloom if we could step through. You don't shake a lifetime of cautious theology in a single afternoon, but sometimes God chooses a small messenger with a fearless grin to nudge you across the threshold. Maybe that's why I cried when Emma showed me her drawing, not because I fully understood it, but because it felt like a reminder from a place more solid than this one. I asked her where we should begin. She squeezed her father's hand and looked up at me as though we were all about to board something wonderful. Start with the colors, she said, then giggled, as if in on a secret I was seconds from learning. I nodded, suddenly aware that the afternoon had grown quieter, that even the wind seemed to be waiting. Here, beneath these trees, my old fear finally loosened its grip, and the doorway the child had drawn in pencil widened, inviting me in. Emma's small hand traced the air as if she were sketching an invisible rainbow. And in that motion, I realized she was already inside a world I had only feared from a distance. Start with the colors, she whispered, as though unveiling a secret doorway. And suddenly the park faded from my awareness. I could almost see what she described. Hues that don't exist here, shades that can't be mixed with any pigment we know. She said they were brighter than jewels and softer than morning mist, colors that seemed to hum with joy. One was like purple, but full of laughter. Another resembled gold, but alive, as if it were singing to her. I listened, entranced, as this 7-year-old spoke of a palette heaven alone could carry. She told me the first thing Jesus showed her were mountains, not the kind we strain to climb with lungs burning and muscles trembling, but living mountains that invited play. She described sprinting up sheer cliffs without fatigue, or simply choosing to float to their peaks, carried by a freedom that felt natural. The mountains themselves responded, she said, releasing low musical tones that vibrated like choirs rising from stone. And then came rivers, flowing not with water, but with crystal that moved like liquid glass. She said the moment she stepped in, her whole body seemed to awaken. It doesn't make you wet, she laughed. It makes you more alive. Jesus challenged her to race, and she swore they laughed until her sides hurt, both of them gliding through currents that sparkled like laughter made visible. The trees were no less astonishing. Emma explained that their branches sensed hunger. When she longed for strawberries, the bark shimmered, and fruit appeared, bursting with the sweetest flavor she had ever known. But it wasn't just nourishment, it was joy you could taste, joy condensed into something you could bite into. She said every mouthful was like swallowing sunlight, and it filled her with such delight that she felt her heart beating in harmony with the branches. Then she told me about animals unlike any I've ever imagined. She rode on the back of a lion that carried her like a gentle guardian, its mane soft as silk and its eyes full of kindness. Eagles circled overhead, but when they spoke to her, it wasn't with screeches or calls, it was her own language, tender and clear. In that place, animals were not separate creatures, but companions, each one alive with a personality, each one eager to share its own story. And then her voice softened. She said she met people, faces from a past she never knew. A woman stepped forward and said, "I am your great-great-grandmother." Though centuries apart, recognition bloomed instantly. Emma told me it felt as though they had been friends forever, as though time itself bent to make space for their reunion. Jesus explained that in heaven, family is not bound by years or introductions. Everyone is kin, woven together by love deeper than any bloodline. Imagine, she said, the greatest family reunion ever dreamed of, but with no end, no goodbyes, only the thrill of belonging magnified to infinity. As she spoke, her eyes widened again. She described cities that glittered not with marble or steel, but with structures formed from love itself. Walls shimmered like gemstones, but Jesus told her they were shaped from prayers whispered on earth, from acts of kindness that mortals thought went unnoticed. Every brick was a testimony, every beam a story of compassion. Then he showed her what she called adventure worlds, realms of discovery beyond imagination. She mentioned oceans with kingdoms beneath them, forests where trees told their tales when touched, and islands that floated like lanterns in the sky. In each world, wonder waited at every step. Emma's words began to spill faster, as if she feared she'd run out of time to share. "Music," she said, "doesn't only sound beautiful, it shines." She could see songs as colors dancing across the air. When voices joined, light patterns bloomed like fireworks, painting the heavens with living mosaics. Even her speaking voice, she giggled, left trails of sparkles floating behind. And in heaven, she told me, everyone has a role to play, but no role feels like work. One person might design flowers, another compose songs, another welcome new arrivals. Every task is pure joy, tailored to what brings the deepest happiness. Time itself bent in strange ways, she explained. You could spend what felt like days wandering with Jesus, yet know it all unfolded in one perfect instant. Past, present, and future tangled together, and if you longed to revisit a memory from earth, you could walk back into it as though it were happening again. Emma described this not with confusion, but with awe, like a child realizing she could step into her favorite storybook whenever she wished. And through it all, she said, the greatest wonder wasn't the colors or rivers or music. It was him, Jesus. Being near him, she said, was like being hugged by sunshine itself, like standing in love so strong it made every other marvel glow even brighter. By the time she finished that part of her story, the air around us felt charged. I realized that what she was unveiling wasn't just a vision of heaven's landscapes, but a reshaping of how I thought about forever. This wasn't the dull eternity I feared. It was a festival of creation, a home brimming with play, a place where the deepest longings of the soul finally exhaled. And Emma, still clutching her father's hand, glanced back at me as if she had only opened the first page of a book I'd been too afraid to read. "There's more," she said softly. "Jesus told me secrets about heaven that people don't know yet." And with those words, the ground seemed to tilt, pulling me closer into the mystery. Emma's voice grew steady, as though she carried words entrusted to her. She said Jesus wanted her to share what he called the truths of heaven, truths that would erase the misunderstandings people cling to on earth. I leaned in, hardly breathing, as she counted them one by one, not with rehearsed solemnity, but with the freshness of a child unwrapping gifts. "The first thing," she began, "is that heaven is never boring. It's the most exciting place you could ever imagine." She explained that Jesus told her human hearts were built for adventure, discovery, and creativity, and eternity is where those longings find their home. Each day unveils something new, a surprise so wondrous you never run out of awe. Her second truth unfolded like a mirror turned inside out. In heaven, every person becomes their truest self. Gone are the fears, the insecurities, the shadows that chain us here. Instead, each life shines with the brightness God always intended, personalities blooming without distortion, uniqueness blazing like stars across eternity. The third truth, she said, rested in relationships. There are no quarrels, no misunderstandings, no distance. Love flows perfectly, weaving every soul into bonds deeper than any earthly tie. "It's like the biggest family reunion," she smiled. Except it never ends, and no one is left out. Then she told me the fourth truth. Learning in heaven never stops, but it feels like play. There are no classrooms, no endless lectures. Instead, if you want to know how stars are born, you help create one. If you want to grasp love, you stand inside the ocean of God's heart. Knowledge is lived, not memorized, and boredom is impossible. Her fifth truth sparkled with delight. Creativity has no ceiling. People design songs that shimmer with light, paint worlds with laughter, and even craft new stories and places. It's as endless as God's imagination, she said, and I could see her eyes gleaming as if she had already glimpsed those limitless possibilities. The sixth truth was about purpose. In heaven, everyone has a role, but it never feels like labor. Each task is perfectly suited to joy, planting flowers that sing, welcoming newcomers, shaping beauty itself. Work becomes play, and play becomes worship. Her seventh truth was tender. Memories of earth, she said, are carried into heaven like treasures. Every good moment is preserved and made brighter, while every wound is healed, every sorrow undone. You keep the joy, but not the scars. The eighth truth turned toward worship. It's not obligation, she whispered. It's celebration. People praise because love overflows, not because they must. Worship feels like being with your favorite person, laughing and singing because you can't help yourself. She pressed on, her face glowing with seriousness. The ninth truth was that growth never stops. In heaven, people keep becoming wiser, kinder, more radiant with love. But unlike here, growth is never painful. It's exhilarating, like stepping higher on a mountain path that only grows more beautiful the farther you climb. And then came the 10th truth. Heaven holds both rest and adventure in perfect harmony. You are utterly safe, utterly at peace, yet at the same time endlessly thrilled. No fear, no danger, only the exhilarating balance of security and discovery intertwined. Emma paused, catching her breath, but she wasn't done. She told me about children who arrive in heaven and live with both the innocence of childhood and the wisdom of maturity, never having to lose either. She spoke of families expanding into something greater, where no one is forgotten, no one lonely. Food itself becomes revelation, each taste opening a new layer of God's goodness. And then came language, no barriers, no confusion. People could speak with words, or with thoughts, or even with colors glowing in the air. She described nature alive, trees and rivers and flowers joining the chorus of love. Space itself was different. Distance melted, and you could be anywhere instantly, even in many places at once. Her words carried me deeper still. She told me emotions in heaven are pure, joy without fear, love without loss, peace without interruption. Service becomes the greatest joy, giving love away so freely that everyone is lifted higher. Rest no longer means exhaustion. It means perfect contentment, the strength to live without running dry. And perhaps most beautifully, individuality is not erased but exalted. You don't become less yourself, she said. You become the truest version of you. She explained that surprises never end, that God's creativity ensures there will always be new wonders. Healing is total, every scar, every wound gone, and joy spreads like light and water, multiplying as it is shared. Finally, she drew a long breath and gave me the truth that silenced the park around us. Heaven is not a prize for the perfect. It is a gift of love. Jesus said you don't have to earn it, she whispered. You only have to receive it. I felt those words pierce straight through me. A child was handing me an answer to the ache that had haunted me for years, and I knew this was only the beginning of what she had to reveal. Emma's eyes glistened as she leaned closer, her words slowing into a hushed cadence, as though the very air around us might not be worthy to overhear. After Jesus showed me all of that, she said, he took me somewhere special, somewhere that belongs only to me. Her parents exchanged a glance, visibly moved, while I braced myself for what came next. She spoke of a garden, but not the kind we know. It was alive with a holiness that no earthly soil could hold. Every flower, every blade of grass, shimmered with purpose. She told me that Jesus explained how every bloom in that place was born out of prayers whispered for her throughout her life. Roses pulsed with the cries of her parents, desperate for her health. Daisies carried the joy of her grandparents praying for her laughter. and sunflowers towering and golden represented strangers who had lifted her name to God without ever meeting her. At the heart of this radiant garden, she said, stood a tree unlike any she had seen before. Jesus told her it had been planted at the moment she was conceived. Its branches bent heavy with fruit that wasn't merely food, but living promises, each piece representing a plan, a dream, a joy God had prepared for her life, both here and in eternity. As she described it, her small voice quivered, and I could almost see her again under hospital lights, fragile yet held together by something far greater. In that celestial orchard, all the fears she had ever known melted away. Then came the moment that broke her. She whispered that Jesus drew her close, held her against his chest, and spoke words she had never dared to believe. "Emma, you are my beloved daughter. I am proud of you. You make me smile every single day. And when you come home, I have even greater wonders waiting." As she repeated them, tears clung to her lashes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were the kind of tears that fall when love is too immense for a child's frame to carry. I felt my own chest tighten, as if her words had cracked something sealed in me for years. She went on, her voice trembling with joy. Jesus, she said, showed her visions of the people she would one day touch on earth. Faces she didn't recognize yet. People carrying fear about eternity, weighed down by doubt, crushed under the thought that maybe they weren't loved. And she saw how her story would breathe hope into them, how her testimony would become a light in their dark nights. She cried, she said, because she realized her experience was not meant just for her. It was for all of us, for every soul on the edge of despair, wondering if heaven is real, if God's arms are still open. She had been chosen as a messenger, a little girl carrying eternity in her hands. Her words painted the air with unbearable beauty. Before returning her to earth, Jesus promised her something staggering, that what she had seen was only the smallest glimpse, a grain of sand compared to the shore of what awaited. He told her the real heaven would be millions of times more wonderful, and that one day everyone she loved could be there with her, if they chose to receive his gift. She described how Jesus even showed her the joy on her family's faces when they would arrive, how their wonder would echo through eternity. And then, like a tender seal over her heart, he gave her a parting gift, his presence, woven so deeply into her that even back on earth she could feel him, sometimes even smell the flowers of her heavenly garden as reminders that he was never far. Emma explained that one moment she was nestled in that garden, and in the next she was back in her hospital bed. Yet she was utterly transformed. The fear that once gripped her small frame was gone. Her parents noticed immediately. Her doctors couldn't explain the peace radiating from her. Overnight, it was as if their daughter had been reborn, carrying a light no illness could shadow. And still, her voice dropped again when she confessed the hardest part, leaving Jesus. She said it hurt to return, but he told her to remember he is always with her, even when unseen. As Emma's story poured out, I realized she had given me more than answers to my fear. She had pulled back a curtain. Earth, she said, is like a school where we learn how to love. Heaven is the graduation, the day when every lesson turns into celebration. She looked at me with eyes far older than her 7 years and added gently, Jesus said you worry sometimes about playing him right, but he wants you to know you show his love really well. That's what matters. Then she wrapped her arms around me with the fiercest hug, and in that embrace, she whispered one last promise that left me undone. He's excited to show you your own garden. He's been preparing it for a very long time, and it's going to be even more beautiful than mine. I sat frozen beneath the trees, the sound of crew members fading into the distance, while the echo of her words pulsed through me. My life, my doubts, my hidden fears, they had been spoken to by heaven through the lips of a child. And though her story had ended, I knew the weight of it was only beginning. After Emma's family finally walked away, their laughter drifting across the grass, I sat rooted to the bench as if my body had forgotten how to move. The park around me grew quiet, the crew long gone, the shadows stretching longer with every passing minute. Yet inside me, her words still thundered. A 7-year-old had just answered the fear that had haunted me for years. My chest ached with the weight of it, but it wasn't despair. It was a fullness I hadn't known I needed. I thought of the way Emma had described heaven, not as a stale, endless service, but as a living adventure bursting with colors, rivers, laughter, and purpose. And then her garden, the tree planted at her conception, every flower a prayer, every fruit a promise. It struck me that the same God who tended her garden was tending one for me, for you, for all of us. I couldn't shake her final words. He's so excited to show you your garden. It's going to be even more beautiful than mine. That single sentence shattered my fear that heaven might erase my identity. Instead, it confirmed that God was crafting a future where I would become more myself than I had ever dared to believe. As twilight deepened, my thoughts turned to you. Yes, you listening to this now. Maybe you carry guilt, maybe shame, maybe a silent dread that heaven is for the perfect and you've already disqualified yourself. Hear me. Emma's story proves otherwise. Heaven is not wages earned, it is a gift placed in outstretched hands. Jesus doesn't wait for flawless people, he waits for willing hearts. If a child can grasp that, maybe it's time for us grown souls to lay down our fears and simply receive. And if you've ever worried you'll lose yourself in eternity, remember what Emma showed us. In heaven, individuality isn't erased, it is magnified. You don't fade into some faceless choir, you blaze into the truest, brightest form of yourself. God didn't design you to vanish into the crowd of eternity. He designed you to radiate like a star set free from gravity. That means every gift, every dream, every part of you that carries his fingerprint will be perfected, not erased. Tonight, I want you to picture your own garden. Imagine a place where every whispered prayer for you has taken root, where strangers' intercessions have bloomed into flowers you never knew existed. Picture a tree heavy with fruit, each one carrying God's plans for your life, plans not lost, not abandoned, but waiting. Jesus himself is preparing that space, arranging every detail around your heart, your soul, your identity, and he cannot wait to show it to you. You are not forgotten, you are not unseen, you are not unloved. Let me pray for you the way Emma's story compels me to. Father, thank you for the gift of heaven. Thank you for reminding us through the innocence of a child that your love is bigger than fear. Your promise is stronger than doubt. For every heart listening, I ask you to tear away the lie that they must earn your embrace. Replace it with the truth that heaven is gift, pure and unshakable. Let them feel right now the weight of your love pressing close. For those who feel small, remind them they are seen. For those who feel unworthy, remind them heaven has already been prepared. For those afraid of forever, let anticipation replace anxiety. May they know that joy is waiting, that peace is real, and that eternity is home. Jesus, thank you for using a little girl to remind us of truths we've buried beneath theology and fear. Give us childlike faith to believe your promises and trust your goodness. Let Emma's story plant seeds of hope in every heart that hears it, until the day comes when our gardens bloom before our eyes. And until that day, let us live with the excitement of children who know the best adventure is still ahead. In your holy name, amen. If Emma's story touched your heart as it touched mine, I want you to carry it forward, share it, hold it, let it reframe your fears about eternity. And if you feel compelled, subscribe and tell me in the comments what heaven means to you now. Because if a 7-year-old can walk into a hospital room, meet Jesus, and come back bearing visions of eternity, then surely God is still speaking to us today. The best is yet to come, and one day we will see it with our own eyes.